The planet Lyrath hung like a jewel in the dark reaches of the galaxy, its oceans sparkling under twin suns and its forests waving gently in the warm breeze. From space, it seemed peaceful, quiet, almost perfect. But for the people who lived there, perfection was slipping away. Lyrath was dying not from natural causes, but from a force so cruel that no Lyrathian had ever imagined it could exist. The Vorvins, a race of ruthless conquerors, had arrived. They were not like any species the Lyrathians had met before. They were merciless, taking without asking, destroying without hesitation, and leaving only ruin in their wake. Cities burned, forests turned to ash. Shanes were poisoned by strange alien devices. The Lyrathian people were gentle and creative. They spent their lives crafting music, art, and stories. They built cities that blended with nature, not against it. They cultivated harmony with the creatures of their planet, living in a rhythm that honored life itself. But against the Vorvins, none of this mattered. The aliens did not understand beauty or life. They only understood power. In the grand city of Valith, the capital of Lyrath, leaders gathered in a tall glass tower that reflected the chaos outside. The hall was filled with tension. Ilaria, the High Counselor, stood at the center, her green eyes wide with fear. Around her were her closest advisors, scholars, and generals. None had ever faced anything like this. "The Vorvins are advancing faster than we can defend," said Kalen, a strategist who had once trained in the art of diplomacy but had never led an army. His voice trembled. "Every day we wait, more of our people die. If help does not come, Valith itself will fall within a week." A murmur of despair ran through the room. Ilaria pressed her hands to the sleek wooden table in front of her, feeling the warmth of the polished surface and wishing it could give her courage. "We cannot fight them alone," she said softly. "Our weapons are weak, our soldiers inexperienced. If the galaxy does not answer our call, everything we love will be lost." Silence followed. The Lyrathians had no experience in broadcasting messages to distant stars. Their technology was advanced enough to send simple signals, but interstellar communication was untested for real emergencies. Still, there was no other choice. They had to try. In the central chamber of the tower, a device thrummed with energy. It was large and round, covered with lights and panels, and its core glowed with a soft blue pulse. The engineers had worked for days, translating the Lyrathian plea into a form that could travel light years. They encoded images of their planet, of their people, of the devastation caused by the Vorvins. They encoded messages of desperation, of hope, and of a wish for mercy. Every word was chosen with care, every image with purpose. Ilaria stepped forward, placing her hands on the device. "May whoever hears this know our hearts," she whispered. "We ask not for vengeance, only for protection. Our people do not wish for war, but we cannot survive this alone." The transmission began. A beam of shimmering light stretched into space, carrying their plea to unknown worlds. As the message faded into the vast darkness, the Lyrathians waited, their hearts heavy with fear and hope. Days passed. Weeks passed. The skies remained silent. Inside the city, life continued, though it was now shadowed by fear. Families huddled in their homes at night, listening for the sound of alien ships overhead. Markets once filled with laughter were quiet. Schools and theaters were empty. The children did not play in the streets anymore. They drew pictures of the stars instead, hoping for something they could not imagine. Kalen and the other leaders worked tirelessly to prepare. They trained soldiers in the basics of combat, constructed barriers, and tried to reinforce buildings that could survive attacks. But every effort felt small against the might of the Vorvins. The alien ships were enormous, casting long shadows over the cities. And their weapons fired in patterns too complex for the Lyrathians to counter. Each day brought news of new losses, new cities destroyed, new lives taken. One night, Laria walked alone through the empty streets of Valith. She passed buildings illuminated by faint, flickering lights and looked up at the stars. They had sent their plea into the galaxy, hoping for help. Did anyone hear it? Would anyone care? Her chest tightened, and a quiet tear slid down her cheek. She wished she could believe in the stars more strongly than fear. She whispered to herself, somewhere out there, someone must care. Someone must come. Far across the galaxy, on a planet called Earth, the plea finally arrived. Humans detected it as a weak signal at first, faint and distant, but it carried a weight that no one could ignore. In the control room of the United Earth Defense Council, scientists and military officers stared at the readouts. The message was unlike anything they had encountered. It was a cry for help, a signal filled with raw emotion, desperate yet honest. The images of burning forests and ruined cities shocked the human observers. Commander Rena Voss, a Deathworlder veteran, leaned forward. Her dark eyes narrowed as she studied the broadcast. "This is no ordinary distress call," she said. Her voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of urgency. "These beings are unprepared for survival. They're facing extermination, and they've asked for help." The room buzzed with conversation. Other officers debated whether Earth should intervene. Some suggested waiting to see if the Lorathians could survive, fearing entanglement and alien conflict. Others argued for immediate action, pointing out the moral responsibility of an advanced civilization to help those in need. Rena stood silently for a moment, watching the images of the fragile, frightened Lorathians. She saw their eyes, wide with terror, their homes being destroyed, their families scattered. And then she knew. Earth would respond. Not with diplomacy alone, not with gentle words, but with the kind of help only humans could provide, help born from survival, from endurance, from the ability to conquer the uncov. In the coming days, preparations began. Human starships were readied, and elite soldiers, the Deathworlders, were chosen for the mission. These were humans who had trained on the deadliest planets in the galaxy, where storms could rip apart cities, gravity could crush bones, and predators could strike without warning. They had survived environments where most species would die. They were humans at their peak, strong, intelligent, adaptable, and fearless. When the decision was made to send them, the Lorathians had no idea what was coming. All they knew was that someone had heard their plea, but the humans who were coming were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. To the Lorathians, they would seem terrifying, almost mythical. They were not merely rescuers, they were forces of nature, shaped by the harshest conditions, ready to confront death itself to save another species. Meanwhile, on Lyrath, the Vorvins continued their relentless advance. They had no mercy, no hesitation, and no understanding of what awaited them. They believed the planet would fall easily, that its people would be crushed under their might. They did not know that Earth had noticed that the strongest warriors in the galaxy were preparing to arrive. And that hope was not as distant as it seemed. Ilaria stood once more in the glass tower. Watching the horizon, where alien ships hovered like dark clouds, the city trembled with each distant explosion, and the cries of the frightened citizens filled the streets. And yet, somewhere deep in her heart, a spark of hope began to glow. She did not know what form the help would take, but she believed it was coming. She whispered again to the stars, "Come, whoever you are. Show us mercy. Show us life." The first glimmers of human starships appeared on the edge of the system weeks later. They were enormous, moving with precision and calm purpose. To the Lorathians, they seemed almost like predators themselves, shining in the darkness with metal and fire. But these humans were not here to destroy. They were here to protect. And as the Deathworlders prepared to descend upon the planet, ready to face the Vorvins and teach a fragile civilization how to survive, the Lorathians held their breath. Unsure if the stars had truly heard their cry, but daring to hope that humanity would be the answer they had begged for. And so, under the twin suns of Lyrith, as cities burned and fear spread, a new chapter was about to begin, one where Earth's Deathworlders would show what it truly meant to survive. To fight and to protect life, even in the deadliest of circumstances. The Lorathians' plea had reached the galaxy. Now, the galaxy was responding in the only way it could, with strength, courage, and the relentless determination of humans. The twin suns of Lyrith cast long shadows across the land as the first human starships approached the planet. From the surface, Lorathians could see enormous silhouettes against. the bright sky shapes that were unlike anything they had ever encountered. The ships were sleek but strong, with surfaces that reflected the sunlight like polished stone. They moved with a precision that suggested experience, intelligence, and a calm confidence. Even from miles away, the humans inside the ships were preparing, coordinating, and analyzing every detail of the approaching planet. In Valith, Ilaria and the council watched with a mixture of awe and fear. "What are they?" one young council member whispered. His voice trembled, not from the heat of the suns, but from the sheer scale and power of the arriving visitors. "They are humans," Ilaria replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I have read about them, studied their history. They are different. They survive where others would perish. They are not like the Vorvins." The low hum grew louder as the starships descended closer to the planet. The people of Lyrith fled to safe areas, unsure whether the newcomers were friend or foe. Many had never seen beings from another planet, let alone one so strong and capable. Some hid behind buildings. Others watched from rooftops, hoping that the arrival would not bring more destruction. The first ship touched down in a vast clearing outside the capital. Dust and debris scattered across the ground as the landing thrusters kicked up clouds. Then the doors opened, and humans began to emerge. They moved in careful, disciplined formations, scanning their surroundings. Their armor was simple but functional, designed to withstand the harshest conditions imaginable. Their faces were serious but not cruel. Their eyes held determination, focus, and an unmistakable sense of purpose. The Lorathians watched from a distance, holding their breath. They had begged the stars for mercy, and now the answer was here. But these beings were not like anyone they had imagined. They were taller, stronger, and moved with an energy that seemed almost unnatural. It was clear that they had been trained for survival in the most dangerous environments. They were humans' Deathworlders, Earth's finest. Commander Rena Voss stepped forward from the group, her gaze scanning the surroundings. She noticed the destroyed buildings, the scattered debris, and the faint glow of fires from the cities. Her mind immediately began calculating which areas were most in danger, where civilians might be trapped, and how to deploy her team efficiently. "Spread out," she ordered. Her voice was calm but carried authority. "We need to assess the situation and secure the most vulnerable areas first." Her team moved with precision. Some climbed to higher ground to observe the city layout. Others checked the outskirts for Vorvin traps or hidden devices. Every movement was deliberate, every action coordinated. It was clear that these humans were not just soldiers, they were problem solvers, explorers, and protectors all at once. Meanwhile, in the streets of Valith, the Lorathians whispered among themselves. "Are they going to hurt us?" asked one child, clutching the hand of an older sibling. "No," Ilaria whispered back, though she did not entirely know herself. "They are here to help us. I can feel it. We called for mercy, and this is what came." As the Deathworlders advanced, they began meeting small groups of Lorathians who had been hiding. The humans approached cautiously, never raising a weapon unless necessary, always speaking in clear, calm tones. One soldier knelt before a frightened group, showing them that they meant no harm. They guided them to safer areas, explaining in simple gestures how to move and where to find shelter. The Lorathians were amazed. These humans were not only capable fighters, they were also teachers, showing them how to survive under conditions that no Lorathian could have imagined. They demonstrated simple techniques, how to fortify a building quickly, how to recognize patterns of Vorvin movement, and how to use the environment to their advantage, Kalen. The Lorathian strategist followed the humans closely. He had spent weeks preparing defenses, but now he realized that his plans were limited. These humans saw possibilities that he could not. They adapted instantly to changing conditions, turning debris into barriers, using fallen trees as shields, and even employing natural features like hills and rivers to protect civilians. Ilaria approached Rena, curious but careful. "Your people. They are incredible," she said softly. "How do you survive like this? How do you face danger so calmly?" Rena looked at her with a steady gaze. "We were trained for the deadliest worlds in the galaxy," she explained. "We learned to survive in storms that could tear cities apart, on planets where gravity crushes the body, and in places where predators are stronger than anything else alive. We learned that fear is natural, but it cannot stop us. Our strength is in our ability to endure, adapt, and protect life even when it seems impossible." Ilaria listened intently. She realized that the humans' power was not just physical. It was in their mindset, their courage, and their willingness to act when others might freeze in fear. They were here to protect Larath, not conquer it. And yet they seemed unstoppable. As the days passed, the Deathworlders set up bases and training areas around the capital. They began to teach selected Lorathians how to defend themselves. The Lorathians were quick learners, and under human guidance, they learned to construct barriers, create early warning systems, and move safely through areas the Vorvins had contaminated. One Lorathian, a young man named Kale, became particularly close to Rena. Kale had always been curious about the stars, but now he was learning to see them differently. He observed the humans, noting their discipline, their ingenuity, and their unwavering courage. "You are not like anyone I have ever seen," he said one evening, as they worked together to repair a damaged communications tower. Rena smiled faintly. "We are humans," she replied. "We have faced worlds where survival is impossible. We learn, we adapt, and we protect each other. That is what we do. You will see it is not about fighting. It is about understanding the world and finding ways to survive." Kale nodded, inspired. He realized that Lorathians had been sheltered from the harsh realities of life. They had relied on their gentle ways, their harmony with nature, and their creativity. Now, they were learning resilience, and it was empowering. The humans were showing them that even in the face of destruction, life could find a way. As the Deathworlders explored the outskirts of Valeth, they encountered the first signs of the Vorvins' return. Alien patrols moved slowly through the forests, scanning for any signs of life. The humans observed quietly, taking notes, studying patterns, and preparing a plan. They were careful not to alarm the Lorathians, who were watching from a distance, learning by example. Rena gathered her team. "We need to teach them not only to survive, but to think ahead," she said. "The Vorvins will return. They always do. We must show the Lorathians how to be ready, how to protect themselves, and how to protect each other. Survival is a skill, not luck." The next days were filled with teaching and preparation. Lorathians learned to recognize signs of danger, how to move silently through forests, how to use natural terrain for protection, and how to help each other without panic. They built simple shelters, reinforced key structures, and created systems to warn civilians of approaching threats. Kalon watched in awe as humans worked alongside the Lorathians. "I have spent my life studying strategy," he admitted to Rena one afternoon. "But I have never seen anything like this. Your people, they think differently. They act differently. They survive differently. You're teaching us not only to defend our planet, but to become stronger ourselves." Rena nodded. "Strength comes in many forms," she said. "It is not only about weapons or armor. It is about courage, adaptability, and teamwork. Lorathians have all of these qualities, they just need to learn to use them in ways they have never had to before." By the end of the first week, Valeth was transformed. Buildings were fortified, civilians were better prepared, and the Lorathians had begun to see themselves as capable of survival, even against overwhelming odds. The Deathworlders continued to work tirelessly, never seeking recognition, only focusing on the task at hand, protecting life, and preparing a fragile species for the battles that might come. And yet, even as the humans trained the Lorathians, the Vorvins were watching. From the darkness of space, their ships lingered near the outer planets of the system. They had detected the arrival of humans and were curious, but they underestimated them. They assumed the humans would be another challenge easily overcome. They did not yet know that the Deathworlders were the ultimate test humans forged to survive anything. And now, ready to defend a planet that had no chance alone, Illyria looked out from the top of the glass tower once more. The humans were working alongside her people, teaching, guiding, and protecting. The city was not yet safe, but for the first time in weeks, she felt hope. Hope that the stars had answered. Hope that the Lorathians might survive. And hope that humanity, the strongest, most resilient species of all, had come to show them what it meant to endure, to fight, and to live. The twin suns set behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the city. In those shadows, humans and Lorathians worked side by side, preparing for the challenges to come. The planet was still under threat, but now it had a chance. A chance to survive, ACH. The horizon of Laruth trembled as the first Vorvan ships appeared. Unlike the humans who had arrived quietly and with purpose, the Vorvans moved like shadows of destruction. Their ships were jagged, black, and vast, casting dark shapes across the forests and plains below. From a distance, their movements were precise, but there was no sense of mercy in the way they approached. Every pattern, every signal screamed of conquest. In Valeth, the city prepared. The humans, the Deathworlders, moved with calm purpose. Commander Rena Voss stood atop a hill overlooking the city, her eyes scanning the dark forms in the sky. "This is what we have prepared for," she said quietly to her team. "Remember your training. Remember your purpose. And most importantly, remember to protect the people who cannot protect themselves yet." The Lorathians watched nervously from behind the fortifications the humans had helped build. They had learned much in the past days. How to strengthen buildings, how to move safely, how to spot patterns in enemy movement. But nothing could truly prepare them for the sheer size and power of the Vorvan fleet. It stretched across the horizon, hundreds of ships moving in a slow, menacing line. Kale, standing beside Ilaria, gripped her hand tightly. "They are enormous," he whispered. His usual calm had vanished, replaced with fear and awe. Ilaria nodded. "We are not alone," she said softly. "The humans are here. We have a chance," Rena signaled to her team. They dispersed, moving through the city and surrounding areas, placing sensors, creating barriers, and checking evacuation routes. Every Deathworlder worked silently, efficiently, as if the entire planet depended on their actions, because it did. When the Vorvans finally descended closer, their ships released small scouts fast-moving drones that swept across the land, scanning for life, for resources, for weaknesses. The humans had anticipated this. Sensors placed by the Deathworlders detected the scouts early, and teams moved to intercept them before they could reach civilian areas. The first encounter was tense but brief. A small group of Vorvan drones moved into a forested area near the city, searching for survivors. Humans and a handful of trained Lorathians had set a trap, using barriers, false signals, and carefully prepared obstacles. When the drones approached, the humans triggered the barriers, forcing the machines to change course. Some were captured. Others were forced to retreat. The Lorathians watched in amazement. These humans were not fighting recklessly. Every move was calculated, every action designed to protect life and minimize destruction. Kale turned to Rena. "How do you always know what to do?" he asked. Rena smiled faintly. "We study danger. We anticipate it. We learn from the world, from experience, and from each other. Fear is natural, but action is stronger. Today, we protected the people. Tomorrow, we will protect the city. And after that, the entire planet, if we must." The Vorvans, noticing the resistance, increased their efforts. Larger ships descended, and more drones spread across the landscape. They did not attack recklessly. Instead, they observed, testing the humans and the Lorathians, looking for weaknesses. But the humans were ready in Valeth. Leah coordinated with Rena. They set up signals to alert citizens, directing them to safe zones. Humans and trained Lorathians moved through the city, helping families, reinforcing buildings, and using natural terrain as protection. The once fragile city now resembled a living fortress. Guided by human ingenuity and strength, Kale joined a group of humans in setting up additional defenses. They moved quickly, placing energy barriers, camouflage nets, and warning systems. He watched how effortlessly the humans worked together, communicating without confusion, anticipating each other's needs. Even the smallest tasks were carried out with precision. As the first real attack began, the Vorvins deployed energy pulses intended to disable the city's infrastructure. But the humans had prepared for this. Barriers absorbed the energy, and key systems had been shielded. Fires broke out in some areas, but humans and Lorathians worked together to extinguish them quickly. The Vorvins were frustrated. These were not helpless people. These were survivors who had been taught by a species that thrived in danger. Rena led a small team into the outskirts where Vorvin drones had landed. They moved silently through the shadows, dismantling the drones carefully to prevent harm to the environment or civilians. Lorathians followed, learning how to move, how to observe, and how to act without panic. Kale was amazed by their efficiency. He realized that survival was not about strength alone. It was about calmness, its observation, and understanding the world around you. Hours passed. The Vorvins tested the city repeatedly, each time expecting chaos and defeat. But the humans were relentless. They anticipated every move, countered every tactic, and taught the Lorathians to do the same. Slowly, the Lorathians began to gain confidence. They saw that with preparation, patience, and teamwork, even the most terrifying enemy could be managed. One night, Kale and Rena climbed to the top of a hill overlooking the city. The Vorvins had retreated for the moment, regrouping in orbit. Fires still burned, but much of the city had survived. Kale looked out over Valeth and whispered, "I never thought we could defend ourselves like this. Not without losing everything." Rena nodded. "You can. You are learning, and we are here to make sure you do. Survival is a skill, Kale, and you are capable of it." In the days that followed, humans and Lorathians continued to work together. They repaired buildings, strengthened defenses, and trained more civilians. The Lorathians were no longer passive victims. They were active participants in their survival. Children learned simple ways to stay safe. Adults learned to build, to observe, and to act quickly in emergencies. The Vorvins returned several times, each time testing the city in new ways. But the humans were ready. They had taught the Lorathians to anticipate, adapt, and respond. The attacks were fierce, but they caused less damage than expected. The humans were not reckless warriors. They were strategic protectors. Every move was designed to protect life, minimize destruction, and teach survival. Kale noticed a change within himself. Fear still existed, but it no longer paralyzed him. He saw possibilities where before he had seen only danger. He learned to think like the humans, to observe, to calculate, and to act with purpose. He realized that the Vorvins were dangerous, yes, but not unbeatable. With knowledge, preparation, and courage, even the mightiest threat could be faced. Rena observed Kale and others learning quickly. "They will surprise the Vorvins one day," she said quietly to another Deathworlder. "They already are. The moment you teach someone to survive, they are no longer helpless. And these people, they are learning fast." The city began to feel alive again. Lorathians moved with purpose, no longer cowering at shadows. Humans and Lorathians worked side by side, sharing knowledge, teaching, and protecting. Even the smallest acts mattered. A child helped carry supplies. An elder showed a shortcut through the forests. A young woman learned to reinforce a building in minutes. Every contribution strengthened the city. Every act built confidence. Finally, after a week of skirmishes and preparation, a pattern began to emerge. The Vorvins realized that their attacks were ineffective. Every assault was countered, every advance blocked. Humans had taught the Lorathians to anticipate, adapt, and survive. The Vorvins were facing a species that had learned to endure. Guided by another species that had mastered survival itself, Ilaria watched from the tower, her heart swelling with pride. The city was still under threat, but it was no longer fragile. Lorathians were becoming capable, resilient, and brave. She had feared annihilation, but now she saw hope not just for survival, but for a future where her people could thrive. Kale stood beside her, looking out over the city. "We are learning," he said quietly. "Not just from you, but from them. Humans are teaching us more than survival. They are teaching us courage, Rena approached, her calm presence reassuring. Courage is not about not feeling fear, she explained. It is about facing fear with knowledge and preparation. You have that now? Your people have that now. And together, you can face what comes next. The Vorvins had been temporarily repelled, but the battle was far from over. Yet for the first time, the Lorathians felt something they had never felt before: strength. Not the strength of weapons alone, but the strength of knowledge, preparation, and unity. Humans had arrived as warriors, but they were leaving behind teachers, guides, and protectors. And with their guidance, Lorathians were discovering that even against overwhelming odds, survival was possible. As the twin suns rose the next morning, Valeth glowed with renewed energy. The city was scarred, yes, but alive. The people were alert, confident, and ready. And in the distance, the Vorvin ships waited, unaware that they were no longer facing helpless prey, but a species guided by the strongest and most resilient beings in the galaxy: humans. The first clash had been survived. The battle had begun. And the Deathworlders had proven that courage, preparation, and resilience could turn even the darkest hour into hope. The fires from the Vorvin attacks had finally begun to die down, but the city of Valeth was far from safe. Streets were still littered with debris, and the forests surrounding the city had blackened scars where the alien scouts had landed. Yet something had changed in the hearts of the Lorathians. They were no longer paralyzed by fear, with the Deathworlders teaching them. They had discovered courage they never knew existed. Commander Rena Voss and her team moved through the city early in the morning, checking on the survivors and the fortifications they had helped build. Her eyes were sharp, scanning every corner for hidden dangers, but she also observed something unexpected: hope. The Lorathians were beginning to take initiative, repairing buildings, helping their neighbors, and even practicing the defensive maneuvers the humans had taught them. Kale moved beside Rena, carrying tools to reinforce a damaged bridge. "I never imagined we could rebuild so quickly," he said, glancing at the humans coordinating with small teams of Lorathians. "Your people. They work so fast, and they know exactly what to do." And I gave a faint smile. "We have had to. Our survival depends on efficiency and teamwork, and now so does yours. The more you practice, the stronger your people will be. You are learning faster than I expected." As they worked, a small group of children approached, curious but cautious. One little girl held a model of a human starship she had drawn, carefully coloring each line. Rena knelt beside her. "That's very good," she said kindly. "Do you want to learn more about how these ships work?" The girl's eyes widened, and she nodded enthusiastically. Kale watched quietly, noticing how humans taught without fear, without impatience, and always with care. They did not see themselves as rulers or masters. They were guides, protectors, and teachers. And slowly, the Lorathians began to trust them, not only as warriors, but as friends. By midday, the humans had gathered a group of Lorathian adults for a more advanced training session. The session took place in a large cleared area outside the city, with walls of energy barriers protecting them from any sudden threats. The humans began to teach strategy, observation, and adaptation, the skills that had allowed them to survive on the deadliest worlds. One human instructor, Joran, spoke clearly and slowly, making sure the Lorathians understood. "Survival is not about fighting only," he explained. "It is about understanding the world, predicting what might happen, and acting before it is too late. Watch carefully. Listen carefully. Learn how to read danger before it reaches you." The Lorathians listened intently, absorbing every word. They practiced moving silently through the terrain, learning to spot hazards hidden in shadows, and to recognize signs of Vorvin movement from a distance. Kale found himself thinking in ways he had never thought before. He observed the winds, the shifting light, even the sounds of distant animals, learning how to detect anything out of place. That evening, Rena gathered her team for a planning session. "The Vorvins will return," she said plainly, "and next time they will come with more force. Our goal is not just to defend the city, but to teach the Lorathians to defend themselves. The more capable they become, the stronger this planet will be. Remember, we protect life first. Everything else comes second. As the Deathworlders worked, Cale noticed small changes in his people. A baker who had spent his life in quiet shops was now helping build barricades. A teacher who had only worked in classrooms was instructing others on safe evacuation routes. Even children practiced signals and drills, learning to stay calm during alarms. Laroth was becoming alive in a new way, a city united by purpose, guided by humans who had mastered survival. In the following days, Rena focused on leadership training for the Larathians. She gathered a group of council members, generals, and volunteers. "You will need to lead your people," she said. "Your strength is not only in your hands, but in your mind. Plan, observe, and coordinate. Teach others to survive. The more you understand strategy and preparation, the more your people can endure. Humans will guide you, but you must take responsibility." Cale found himself included in these lessons. He learned to think beyond immediate danger, to anticipate how the Vorvins might attack next, and to coordinate multiple teams for safety and efficiency. Rena encouraged him to speak, to suggest ideas, and to lead small groups. For the first time, Cale felt a sense of confidence he had never known. One afternoon, a small group of humans and Larathians worked to clear a forest path when they encountered signs of Vorvin activity, a landing mark, and strange tracks. Humans immediately taught the Larathians how to examine the area safely, looking for traps or hidden devices. Cale followed their instructions, noticing subtle clues in the terrain that had previously gone unnoticed. By the end of the exercise, they had mapped a safe route through the forest and learned how to avoid potential threats. The Larathians began to realize that survival was a skill they could learn. With every lesson, every practice session, every moment of guidance from the humans, their fear was replaced by understanding. They were no longer helpless. They were participants in their own defense. That evening, Cale and Rena walked through the city together. Children practiced drills in open areas, families reinforced their homes, and volunteers coordinated supply distribution. Cale looked around and whispered, "I never imagined we could move so quickly, so efficiently. We used to wait for miracles. Now, we are creating them ourselves." Rena nodded. "That is what happens when people learn to survive. You build hope with action, not with wishes. Every step you take, every decision you make, strengthens your people. The Vorvins will not expect it, and that is where your advantage lies." Over the following week, the humans introduced advanced survival techniques, including building hidden shelters, creating silent communication signals, and even developing simple devices to detect Vorvin energy pulses. Larathians practiced relentlessly, learning from every mistake, observing every human demonstration, and gradually understanding the value of preparation. Cale noticed the difference not only in himself, but in the city. People moved with purpose instead of fear, helping one another without hesitation. They were becoming a community of survivors, guided by the humans, but increasingly independent. Ilaria saw the change too, her heart swelling with pride. The city was no longer fragile, it was resilient. One evening, Rena called Cale and a few other young Larathians aside. "You have learned quickly," she said. "Now, it is time to practice leadership. You will lead small teams through exercises, teach what you know, and help others learn to survive." "You are ready." Cale felt a surge of confidence. Leading others was daunting, but he now understood what Rena had taught him. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was action despite it. He guided his team carefully, observing every movement, correcting mistakes, and encouraging success. By the end of the exercise, his team had navigated a simulated Vorvin attack flawlessly. As night fell over Valeth, humans and Larathians gathered to review their progress. Fires glowed softly in the central square, and people shared stories of what they had learned. There was laughter, quiet conversation, and a sense of unity that had never existed before. Larathians felt hope, and it was stronger than fear. Rena addressed the group. "You have done well," she said, "but the real test is coming. The Vorvins will return. They will challenge everything you have learned. But now, you are not helpless. You are not alone. You have each other, and you have learned how to survive. That is more powerful than any weapon. Kale looked around at the faces of his people, children, elders, neighbors, friends. He realized that the humans had given them more than skills. They had given them confidence. The city was alive, prepared, and capable. The Lorathians understood that the battle ahead would be difficult, but they no longer faced it with trembling hearts. In the distance, shadows moved in the forests and plains, Vorvan scouts observing, testing, and planning their next move. But for the first time, they would not find a helpless prey. They would find a planet defended by a species learning to survive. Guided by humans who had mastered the deadliest worlds in the galaxy, the twin suns set, casting long golden rays across Valith. The city hummed with life, preparation, and quiet determination. Humans and Lorathians worked together, side by side, preparing for what was to come. The lessons were clear. Survival was not a gift, but a skill. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act. And hope was not wishful thinking, but the product of action, preparation, and unity. For the first time, Lorathians could see a future where they might not only survive, but thrive. And with the humans beside them, that future felt within reach. The next phase of their story was approaching a test of all they had learned, a confrontation that would determine the fate of the planet. In a moment when the true power of humanity would shine through, not just as warriors, but as teachers, guides, and protectors. The morning sun rose over Valith, casting soft golden light across a city that was no longer the fragile place it had once been. Lorathians moved through the streets with purpose, carrying supplies, reinforcing barricades, quietly checking on neighbors. Children practiced safety drills, while elders shared guidance with young adults. The city hummed with life and preparation, a living testament to the lessons taught by the humans, the Deathworlders, who had transformed a people in weeks from terrified to resilient. From her vantage point atop the central tower, Ilaria surveyed the city. She felt a quiet pride that she had never imagined. Her people had learned not only to survive, they had learned to adapt, to plan, and to work as a community. And now, the true test was approaching. The Vorvans, who had once seemed unstoppable, were returning. Commander Rena Voss stood beside her. "They have observed us," she said, her voice calm but serious. "They know we are here, but they do not yet understand what we have created." Kale joined them, carrying a map of the city with markers for safe zones, defensive positions, and supply routes. He had led small teams to reinforce each area, guided by humans who had taught him how to anticipate enemy movements and think strategically. He looked at the horizon where distant shadows hinted at the Vorvan's approach, and felt a mixture of fear and determination. "We are ready," he said, his voice steady. "We can face them," Rena nodded. "Not just with weapons, but with skill, preparation, and courage. Remember, victory comes from understanding the enemy and protecting those who cannot protect themselves." The first Vorvan ships appeared above the forests, their black shapes cutting starkly against the bright sky. They moved deliberately, scanning the land below for signs of life. But they were met not with chaos, but with order. The Rathians, guided by humans, had prepared signals, barriers, and observation points. Every movement was planned, every route monitored. The initial encounter was tense. Vorvan drones swept through the outskirts of the city, testing the defenses. But the humans had anticipated this. Teams of Deathworlders, working with trained Lorathians, monitored every approach. Early warning signals alerted civilians, guiding them to shelters while human teams intercepted the drones. With precise coordination, they neutralized the threat without harm to anyone nearby. Kale led one of the Lorathian teams, moving through the forests to check observation points and repair sensors. He realized how far they had come. The same people who had once cowered indoors now moved with focus and confidence, communicating clearly, helping each other, and acting calmly even under pressure. "We have learned much," he said to his team, "and we will survive." Rena and her team coordinated with other Deathworlders moving strategically across the city. They set traps for the Vorvans, reinforced vulnerable points, and ensured that all civilians were safe. Every action was designed not to destroy, but to protect, to guide, and to teach. The Lorathians were not mere observers, they were participants, learning to act decisively, to anticipate danger, and to help each other. Hours passed. The Vorvins tested the defenses repeatedly, sending small groups to observe and disrupt. Each time humans and Lorathians worked together to counter them, barriers absorbed energy pulses, observation points detected enemy movements, and civilians moved safely to protected zones. The city functioned like a living organism, each member contributing to its survival. Kale moved to a damaged bridge with a small team, reinforcing it with materials salvaged from nearby ruins. A Vorvin scout drone approached, but Kale calmly directed his team, using lessons taught by the humans. They moved quickly, positioning barriers and activating sensors that triggered a diversion, sending the drone off course. The Lorathians watched in awe, realizing that clever strategy could outmatch raw power. As evening approached, the main Vorvin ships entered the atmosphere. Their size and presence were intimidating, but the humans were ready. Rena coordinated human teams with Lorathian volunteers, establishing defensive lines, communication relays, and early warning networks. Kale led a group of Lorathians to reinforce the city outskirts. Guiding them with confidence and calm, the Vorvins attempted their first real strike. Aiming at the central square where most civilians had gathered, but the humans had already evacuated everyone safely. Barriers absorbed energy attacks, and human teams redirected the Vorvins' attention. Lorathians assisted by maintaining signals, observing movements, and guiding humans to weak points. It was a coordinated effort, display of strategy and unity that the Vorvins had not anticipated. By nightfall, the Vorvins realized that their attacks were failing. Each assault was countered, every strategy anticipated. Humans had prepared not just defenses, but an entire city capable of adapting, surviving, and learning from each encounter. The Vorvins did not understand the bond that had formed between humans and Lorathians. A bond built on trust, guidance, and mutual protection. In a quiet moment, Kale and Rena walked through the central square. Fires from minor skirmishes still glowed, but the area was safe. "I never thought we could do this," Kale said softly. "Not alone and not even with your guidance, perhaps, but together we can face anything." Rena nodded. "That is the point. Humans can guide, but your people must act. Courage, preparation, and unity, these are the true strengths. And you have them now. The Vorvins may be powerful, but they have not faced a people prepared, aware, and determined to survive." The next morning, the Vorvins launched another attempt, targeting the northern districts. This time, they were met with a coordinated response from humans and Lorathians. Observation points detected their approach early, teams activated barriers, and civilians were safely guided to shelters. Kale and other Lorathian leaders directed teams to reinforce weak spots, moving with calm precision. For hours, the battle unfolded like a careful dance. The Vorvins were relentless, but the city was ready. Humans anticipated each move, countered with strategy, and taught Lorathians to act decisively. Slowly, the Vorvins began to retreat, unable to breach the defenses or anticipate the clever coordination of the defenders. By midday, the Vorvins withdrew entirely from the atmosphere. Their ships lifted into space, scanning the planet one last time before leaving the system. They had been defeated not by brute force, but by preparation, observation, courage, and unity. The humans and Lorathians had protected every citizen, preserved every essential structure, and proven that even the deadliest threat could be countered with skill and determination. The city erupted in quiet celebration. Lorathians hugged one another, children laughed for the first time in weeks, and elders shared stories of bravery and guidance. Kale stood in the center of the square, watching his people move with confidence and pride. He realized that their survival was not a miracle, it was the result of learning, teaching, and working together. Illyria approached Rena, her eyes shining. "You have saved more than our city," she said. "You have saved our people, our hope, and our future. Lorathians will never forget this." Rena smiled faintly. "We did not save you alone," she said. "You saved yourselves. We guided, we taught, and we protected. But your courage, your willingness to learn, and your unity made this possible. You are stronger than you know. Kale joined them, feeling a deep sense of pride. We will continue to learn, he said. We will not forget what you have taught us. And one day, we will protect others, just as you protected us. Rena nodded. That is the best way to honor what we have done here. Survival is a skill, but it is also a responsibility. You have learned it. Now, use it wisely. In the following days, humans and Larethians worked together to repair the city, rebuild homes, and restore essential services. The once fragile society had transformed into a resilient, capable civilization. Larethians continued to practice the techniques taught by humans, preparing for future challenges, strengthening bonds within their community. Kale observed the progress with quiet satisfaction. He remembered the terrified, hopeless people who had once looked to the skies for mercy. Now, they were confident, skilled, and capable. Humanity had shown them not just how to survive, but how to live with courage, knowledge, and unity. As the twin suns set over Valeth, the city glowed softly with warmth and hope. The Vorvins were gone, but the lessons remained. Larethians had discovered strength within themselves, guided by humans who had mastered survival on the deadliest worlds. The bond between the two species had created something extraordinary, a planet ready to endure, grow, and thrive. Ilaria, Kale, and Rena stood together atop the central tower, looking out over the city. We were afraid, Ilaria said softly. But now we know. We can survive anything, Rena smiled. You do not just survive, you endure, you learn, and you protect life. That is the strength of your people. And that is why you will continue to thrive, Kale added. And we will never forget what you taught us. Courage, preparation, unity, these are now a part of us. The stars above Lirith twinkled gently as if acknowledging the bond between worlds. Humans would leave, returning to their home among the stars, but their teachings and guidance would remain forever. Lirith had faced destruction and survived. Its people had discovered courage, resilience, and the power of unity. And the galaxy had witnessed the strength of a species guided by the humans, the Deathworlders, who had